What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Total Fight Mic. My name is Gutierrez. So I know it's been a little bit since we last spoke. My editors actually had an operation on his pinky. He had a tendon that was torn in his pinky, so he had to get pins out. And hopefully I wish him a speedy recovery. I wish him a healthy recovery, because I don't know what that's like, but that probably does suck. I didn't want to burden him with any unnecessary content or videos that he didn't need to post. I kind of wanted to give him a little bit of a rest. We missed a post-fight for Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker. Listen, that was a great fight. That was a classic. Dustin Poirier came out on top and moved a little bit forward, but Dan Hooker's stock also went up in that fight because that was a phenomenal fight. And then it was July 4th, the weekend of 4th of July, that actually landed on a Saturday this year. And in the midst of all that, unfortunately, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, the father of UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov, unfortunately passed away due to COVID-19 complications somewhere in Russia. It's horrible news. It's very tragic news. Forget about Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting. He's got to be, his heart is probably broken in so many ways that I can't even describe or put into words. I've lost grandparents that were like parents to me, but I've never lost a parent. And if those of you who have lost parents, understand what Khabib Nurmagomedov is going through. It's a horrible thing. And it's very tragic, and we also wish Khabib Nurmagomedov a healthy recovering process with him and his family. So moving forward, this past weekend was UFC 251, and there were 3 title fights on the line. There were 3. There was the UFC Bantamweight Championship, the UFC Featherweight Championship, and the UFC Welterweight Championship. Now, the first championship was Peter Yan, who only had 1 loss and was undefeated in the UFC coming into this bout against Jose Aldo. Obviously, Jose Aldo, the former longtime featherweight champion of the UFC and the WEC. And the reason he got a title shot off of a loss is because a lot of people felt like he won that fight. Excuse me, guys. A lot of people felt like he had won that fight. It was a very close fight. I guess, I believe numerically speaking, excuse me. I believe numerically speaking, Marlon Moraes landed a little bit more, but it was Jose Aldo's shots that actually counted, and that's how he got the title shot against Peter Yan, because it was vacant. Henry Cejudo, Triple C, had vacated it after he defended it against Dominic Cruz, another former long-time bantamweight champion. So this title was vacant, and Jose Aldo started off strong. It was a vintage Jose Aldo fight. He started off strong with leg kicks that actually put Peter Yan on his butt. I believe he landed with the right hand. I don't remember if it was an uppercut or an overhand hook, but it landed pretty devastatingly, and it knocked Peter Yan down and got his attention. But as the rounds went on, Peter Yan actually started to utilize his patience and utilize his faking and feinting, and he was actually utilizing his returns quite a bit. So in Muay Thai, you learn how to block and parry shots, especially in boxing too. And if you're in the pocket, if you're close enough in the pocket, meaning if your feet are close enough to your opponent's feet and you're close enough to land punches when you throw them, called being in the pocket, you could actually come back with something else and actually land successfully if you come back with combinations of more than 2 or 3 shots. So it's, high variance striking that Peter Yan was very much putting on against Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo, again, was looking for those power shots, but I felt like a lot of those power shots take a lot out of Jose Aldo, especially dropping down to 135 pounds. He looks great. He still has his power, but Peter Yan was able to persevere, and he was able to get a knockdown, I believe, in the 5th round. And the referee's kind of getting a lot of flack for the late stoppage, because Jose Aldo had his back turned and was belly down, and Peter Yan was just hovering over him, and the back mount position, just hovering over him, raining down shots, and the referee kept saying, "You got to show me something else. You got to show me something else." But unfortunately, it went on a little bit longer than most fans wanted it to. So that being said, the referee's getting a lot of flack for that. But even if he had stopped it, Jose Aldo would be protesting the stoppage, saying that it was premature, because every time that the referee had asked Jose Aldo to fight back, he would move and try to hand fight and at least regain composure. But unfortunately, it wasn't enough. Peter Yan is your new UFC bantamweight champion. So who's next for Peter Yan? I believe he's 15-1, 16-1, coming off of victory over Jose Aldo, a former longtime division champion and a legend in his own right, a very young legend too. He's only 33 years old, is Jose Aldo. For Peter Yan, you can go with Aljamain Sterling. Aljamain Sterling got Corey the Sandman Sanhagen out of there pretty quickly and very smoothly with his jiu-jitsu and his wrestling. That would be a very interesting fight. I wouldn't necessarily label that as a classic striker versus grappler matchup, because you saw that Peter Yan's got some pretty decent grappling. You saw some grappling exchanges with him against Jose Aldo. He was taken down, and then he also took Jose Aldo down himself. You know, it'd be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting to see what how that division stacks up. Another thing I noticed about Peter Yan is that he is one of these fighters, man, that is very comfortable switching stances. He did a lot of his best work in southpaw. Defensively, he was very patient and orthodox in his with his right hand back. But when his right hand was forward, man, he was cocking off that left hand and those left kicks and that right switch kick like it was nothing. Like it was nothing. Southpaw was money for Peter Yan against Jose Aldo, and that's championship level fight IQ, when you're able to make adjustments especially when you get hurt early in the fight. You think about boxing, you think about guys like Andre Ward, who've been rocked with guys like Sergey Kovalev, to come back and, you know, win the rounds and accumulate rounds, and then to eventually make it frustrating for your opponent. So it's good stuff. That was really good stuff. Now, moving up the card, it was a rematch of Alexander Volkanovski opposite of Max Holloway. This was a rematch that took place, I believe it was late last year, early this year. But Alexander Volkanovski had upset the Hawaiian kickboxer and Max Holloway, Max Blessed Holloway, and pretty much ended the, I won't say pretty much ended the Blessed era, because, you know, Max Holloway's still healthy, he's still young, he's still fighting, but he's no longer the champion. But in my opinion, he's still a championship level fighter. He's still an elite level fighter. But when it comes to somebody like Alexander Volkanovski, who trains city kickboxing, not every day, but when he's training in city kickboxing with, you know, guys like under the tutelage of Eugene Behrman, you know, guys like Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker, Kai Kara-France. There's a lot of guys for Alexander Volkanovski to work with and get a lot of different looks, a lot of different body types, and that's a lot of different minds too coming together, because he's got his own coaches from Australia. Their names escape me. I know one of them's last name is Lopez, but he's his head coach, his head trainer, and you know, kind of coming up with a game plan alongside the mind of Eugene Behrman. It's actually helped out the guys at city kickboxing quite a bit. And you see that, you know, Israel's got a belt, Dan Hooker's a contender at lightweight, and Volkanovski's the champ at 145 pounds. So this fight was very odd. This fight was close. This fight was extremely close. This fight was extremely close. Now, the first two rounds obviously went to Max. Max had actually knocked down Volkanovski with a right hand. Sorry guys, my hair's all messed up and crazy. He was tuning him up and piecing him up on angles and, you know, moving very well, and actually he stayed in orthodox position for the majority of this fight. But Volkanovski, you know, in the third, fourth, and fifth round started to put it all together just a little bit more. And again, we're talking about, you know, the fight IQ, being able to make those adjustments, especially when you're down in the first rounds, because combat sports is one of those sports where it's not how you start, it is how you finish, and anything can happen at any given moment. Nothing significant happened, but the one significant thing that you can take away from that championship bout was that Volkanovski and the guys at City Kickboxing, even when they're down, they're not out. Because even Alexander Volkanovski can rally back and win a championship bout with 3 rounds left to go when he's down 2. I believe numerically Alexander Volkanovski outstruck Max Holloway, but Max Holloway's strikes were giving Alexander Volkanovski is full attention. His full attention. Max Holloway had Volkanovski's full attention from the first round all the way to the last round. And you saw that with the way he was fighting. You saw that with the adjustments that he was making throughout the rounds. He would work his base, he would work the body, he worked the clinch quite a bit. He was giving Max some different looks. A lot of people felt that Max won the fight because he was doing, you know, a lot of good work at distance, but excuse me, guys. Again, Volkanovski, he's in, he's out. And it's one extreme or the other with him. He's either all the way in clinching, or he's all the way out, you know, trying to utilize leg kicks and body kicks and try to utilize fakes and feints and work angles on you. And it was a controversial split decision for Alexander Volkanovski, and a lot of people feel that Max Holloway actually should have gotten the nod. And actually, I believe it's DraftKings is the one betting forum that actually gave bettors who bet on Max Holloway their money back. That's how close of a fight that was. So Alexander Volkanovski still your champ. There's guys like Josh Emmett for him at 145 pounds. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Alexander Volkanovski moving forward. Dan Ige is fighting this Wednesday opposite Calvin Kattar, Magomed Shapirov, Zabit Magomed Shapirov, Yair Rodriguez. There's a ton of guys at featherweight that could give Volkanovski some problems. So Amir Makwani, you know, there's a whole bunch of guys for Volkanovski to go through. Now for Max Holloway, having 2 very close fights, having 3 very close fights, 2 of them being with Alexander Volkanovski and 1 of them being with Dustin Poirier. He's only 28 years old as Max Holloway, but he's gone through a ton of wars and he's taken a lot of damage. How's his health? How is his health? I mean, he looks healthy, he looks great, and you know, what weight class is he going to be in? Is he going to be 145 pounds? Is he going to be at 155 pounds? Who knows? It's very difficult to gauge where you're going to be at an elite level in the UFC when you've only won 1 out of your 4 title fights. Now, granted, the one 155 pounds for the interim title, but it was a title 10 pounds north of 145 nonetheless. Now, this isn't talking down on Max Holloway. I love Max Holloway. I've been watching him fight since his debut against Dustin Poirier. But I actually don't know. Who knows where Max Holloway goes from here. I'm sure he just wants to get back in there and get another fight, but can he work his way back to the top and get another title shot? It's a hard sell, especially with the way that all this crap, you know, came out. So, not all this crap, excuse me when I say it. The unfortunate events that unfolded for Max Holloway. You know, what can I say? Don't leave it in the hands of the judges. I mean, it happens, but you can't be mad at these guys if they don't finish fights, because they're fighting the best of the best, and they're fighting the best of each other. So with that being said, the main event was the best of the best at 170 pounds. It was Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal for the UFC welterweight championship of the world. and it was a complete blowout by Kamaru Usman. You know, Jorge Masvidal showed us that his takedown defense is up there. He's not easy to take down, and nor is he easy to hold down. And if you are a hardcore fan, and if you've been watching Jorge Masvidal fight, you know this. You know this already. You know, people look at his submission loss to Toby Imada, and they look at his, you know, TKO loss to Rodrigo Dam, and they look at his, you know, unanimous decision loss when he fought against Paul Daly at Pro Elite. But he was always game. He was always in those fights, even in his fights with Damian Maia. You saw in that fight that he had phenomenal jiu-jitsu defense. Now, granted, he knocked out Ben Askren in 5 seconds with that crazy flying knee, but Jorge Masvidal's got some pretty decent takedown defense, and to make somebody like Kamaru Usman work, that's a victory in and of itself. Even if you didn't win the belt and you didn't have to give up your BMF title, your bad motherfucker title, I guess. You know, you're still a bad man, especially when Kamaru Usman has made everybody crumble when it's come to his wrestling pedigree. Kamaru Usman, all he can do was, you know, knees to the thigh, knees to the body, work in the clinch, try and get those arms to tire out. He was working a lot of foot stomps. He would get the takedown, you know, off of the cage, and then he'd dump him, and then he would try to look for a superior position, and then he would try and elbow him from guard, and then try to advance. It was very textbook. It was very, it wasn't very oblique. It was very textbook. It was smooth. His jiu-jitsu was crisp, but Jorge Masvidal was giving him a lot of problems off of his back defensively. Offensively, not so much, but when they were on the feet, you can tell that Jorge Masvidal was really trying to pop those shots, because he was really trying to throw those body kicks, those leg kicks, and those power punches, but Usman was way too smart for any of that, and he just utilized his wrestling and just nullified all of those techniques from Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal, I believe, needs maybe a win or two. Again, this is one of those fights where his stock went up because of how well he did defensively against Kamaru Usman, even though it was a shutdown by Kamaru Usman, the champ. But the champ's the champ, and he's the champ for a reason. He's only got one loss. Again, undefeated in the UFC. I think he's tied with George St. Pierre and welterweight victories, a specific amount of welterweight victories in a short amount of time, which is very impressive. I mean, you can make a case that Kamaru Usman's making his way to claiming being the most complete and elite 170-pounder in the world. And Jorge Masvidal, again, he's just right there. He's just right there. He's just right there. He's a championship caliber fighter. He's above a contender, but just shy of being a champion. He's right there. Now, this is his second, you know, championship fight in his entire career, I believe. The first one being a unanimous decision loss to Gilbert Melendez, a fight in which I believe he was doing very well in, not just defensively, offensively. You know, he still got the BMF title. You could run it back again with Nate Diaz. You could, you know, have a fight with Colby Covington. You know, Tyron Woodley's looking for another fight. Gilbert Burns is another #1 contender that's probably going to challenge Kamaru Usman next. There's Santiago Ponzinibbio. There's Leon Edwards, who doesn't get enough credit. There's a whole bunch of guys at 170 pounds for both of these guys to fight. So 135, 145, and 170 are actually shaping up to be some pretty deep divisions in the UFC, and it's pretty interesting because mixed martial arts is the only sport going on right now, and you know, boxing is going on here and there, and Bellator just announced, I believe, July 24th, they're going to try and have something with Sergio Pettis. They just announced, I believe. So, I mean, yeah. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode of the Total Fight Mic. My name is Danny Gutierrez. I want to wish a quick and healthy recovery to my editor, Patrick Lesnicki. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the sequel. Bye, everybody.